So I will provide the introductions. So Triin Malk is a restorer, heritage protection, worked in the Cultural Value Board and Heritage Foundation, and right now you are doing a doctorate in Estonian Arts Academy and focusing on the Tallinn Old Town. Kalle Vellevoog is an architect expert and as of 2014 been running the Estonian Republic 100 project, public space, and is one of the authors of the Estonian exhibition. Indrek Kalman, architect, city urban planner, the lead architect partner of the Architects Bureau Plus, and in Paljassaare, the climate neutral campus development authors. Eik Herman, you have so nicely lined up. Again, from Estonian Art Academy and co-editor of the construction art and one of the authors of the competition for architecture. So this is near zero information, and these are even more topical right now than they were 3 years ago. Maybe statistics have changed a little bit, but I would advise you to familiarize yourself with them. I will start with you, Eik. So the big picture. So near zero exhibition. So you started with near zero energy buildings, and you reach the atmospheric warming. So what happens if it's at 4 degrees or if it's less? And all the causalities and connections. So what would you like to bring out in this context? So if the construction sector of this industry with the carbon footprint 50%, which is bigger than globally than in Europe. So what should I really bring out here? So right now, if I were to look at the latest data, then we are moving towards this +5. So when we prepared this exhibition, then we started with the planet, and we reached the near zero energy house, or whichever the order actually was. So what we looked at was one thing as we understood it, that the most important measure to measure progress in a certain direction is the carbon footprint per person, per capita. For example, in Estonia, the latest data, it sort of goes up and down 15 to 20 tons per year per person. I looked at Norwegian data, actually quite significant, 9 tons. So in order to stay in this timetable for a plus degree and a half, we would need to have 1 ton per year until the end of the century. So that means that in Estonia, so we are congratulating ourselves that if we are able to renovate 4 apartment buildings, but we need to reduce our footprint 15 times. So that means I see a gap here. It's kind of like you have a person who has 60 to 70% burn scars, and then you can give them some foot cream, and then you're sort of happy with the outcome. So that we're doing well. So it's quite bleak. So it was actually quite depressive when we prepared for this exhibition. But it doesn't mean that we do one thing and there is one solution, but rather we have a lot of different scales. We need to look at this problem, and we should not leave no means untouched. It's not a question, shall we do this or that, but it's a complex approach. Indrek Kalman. So this dispute whether the old is more sustainable or cross-use, reuse versus building new. You build new things, climate neutral, but still. So can you tell us about Hundipea project? And how can you follow the principles of sustainability there. It's a question, maybe a few words about myself, that I try to be the person who's near zero. So that means that I have been trying to find through my practice something what is the environmentally friendly approach. And last 10 years, I have lived mostly in a refurbished farmhouse not far from here. And it survives off the electric car batteries which have been crushed in Oslo. So the circular economy and survival of something old. So this is the background. And at the same time, I have calculated the footprint on my family, and I have offset it. So what we have not been able to reduce, we have offset with the production of solar energy and renewable energy sources. So this Hundibia so far has been a hobby as well. As Eik mentioned quite well, because the wound is so great, then as a single person, of course, we bear our own responsibility. And it would start with us as individuals, but at the same time, we need to do something greater. And for me, this Hundibär started with this sort of community project where I try to convince different landowners whose lands are near the area which can be considered to be a city center of Tallinn, which need to be developed in order to stop urbanization, which has the biggest environmental impact. So we wanted to encourage these people to work together and to think along these lines, that maybe it'll be good to develop this area in an integrated way, and perhaps using methods which have not been used before, because this is something which would help us to overcome these difficulties which a single developer can never overcome. Would it be mobility? So would it be communication, impacting legislation on the city or the state level? Or would it be helping a community to come about which is comfortable for all of us? Because we should not forget that everything we do it for other people. Now, coming to your question, then yes, indeed, the substance which we need to keep and save and to be respectful, then it's not a new thing in our industrial landscape, but it doesn't mean that this kind of the new would have lost its function and that it's of lesser value. Because here we still have a lot of interesting ideas. Because if you cannot reuse something as a building, then buildings can be reused as ruins, and ruins can be basis for community gardens, for example. But if you talk about the integrated approach, then this is wider than local governments. And often it's a problem of the local governments having good cooperation, because if you are want to stop urbanization with Hundibär, but at the same time it takes place elsewhere, because then there is no effect. So, Kalle, do you have any answers? So if it's a competition-based thinking, how can we overcome that? Because we're considering this a green transition, but we are looking at environmental disaster So as we just heard that Eik said that you become quite pessimistic. So how we can establish this common goal if you're looking at the shrinking small towns? Do you have this model which you've been thinking about? And for when it comes to shrinking small towns, then one of the topics we have understood is that in order for us to be cautious with buildings, we have to be cautious about space. So the intra-building space, especially in the conditions where the small towns are shrinking, and looking at these different developments in small towns, and sometimes we talk about the development of general plans for small towns. Then this is the campaign, how it's done. It's actually quite scary. Then you have some companies who work in the field of general plans. So I don't know what the actual final deadline is. But there was a short time period when they tried to provide the plans for these merged new local governments. And this work is in the hands of quite a small number of companies who have this capability. And this campaign planning means that we have less time for all the details. And sometimes it's hard to find if we don't have very clear overview, if we don't know which way we're going. So it means that we have a race in time. So we are trying to organize these competitions for public space in the city centers. And this is what determines the future development of small towns. So if something is not quite well, and the general planning has been done in order just to get things done, and so all the economic interests have been covered and everybody gets the maximum building rights, then it might actually either provide impetus or push the small town onto a wrong track altogether. There's an example. 2017, when we had this, we were running out of the forest program, then with Ingrid Malt, we had a bit of a tour across Estonia, so we could look at all the villages and to see who would be ready to join this follow-up program. So it was very enlightening because about 50 local governments were looked at, and the problems are different, capabilities are different, and some of the local governments have very clear willingness and preparedness to see the possible problems, to involve experts and so forth. And for some, it's really sad how the vision is lacking. And once the decision is being made, then it depends on the economic interest of the moment. The example I have, one was in Narva-Jõesuu, where we thought that maybe they would like to join with the public space program, and we also thought that maybe there's this empty area where there's the bus station has been, where the buses turn around. And if you know the history of Narva-Jõesuu, that was the central square of Narva-Jõesuu. This had the most important buildings there. And this is where the Russian Orthodox Church used to be. And apparently the local government wanted to restore that. So the question was that, so if you're going to restore the church, because there is a Soviet building on that plot and it's being used a lot, so how are you going to then create this space around this church? Because I assume that the municipality officials know that this is the main square, then you can have the competition held for the main square, and then the buildings which will be there will follow a certain structure. So they found 2 detailed plans which were valid. And in the middle of the central square, they showed that here we're going to put a supermarket. And then the detailed plan there was that big hangar with a parking lot around it. So a negative image of the space which used to be before the war. And I propose that perhaps we would take some time out and think about it a little bit. So maybe we can use this space a little bit better, and we would have some architectural competition held there. Then unfortunately there's no initiative there. And when we went there this summer, then yes indeed, now there is a big hangar in the middle of this square. And then there is a big asphalt parking lot around it. So if you talk about the sustainable use of buildings, then I would like to extrapolate that idea. That we also need to consider the use of urban space, and through these competitions we try to improve the situation. So I don't want to really question you one after another, so I'd like to ask you that what are the ideas you had today? Thank you, very specific question. Having listened to the last conversation, I would say that yes, it's nice that in Lihula we have had the heritage site for such a long time. We have potential and good space available still, and hopefully there will be more, because here we have also a nice project for the main street coming up. So we've had this competition has been held, and nice public space will be made into the old ruins of the Orthodox Church and also the manor house. So we have been here for a week with the students, having visited all the buildings one by one, seeing all sorts of auxiliary buildings, and so it's been quite interesting here. But what are the thoughts when it comes to circular economy or repurposing? So maybe you could talk about 2 things. One is the academic side of things, and the other is personal. So academic first. So from next year onwards, we are going to start a larger research project with the help of the University of Tallinn and the Academy of Arts. So we have the restorers and architects there as well, to analyze this new renovation wave and try to sort of set the aim that we can analyze the carbon footprint when it comes to renovation solutions and the long-term sustainability and the whole thing. So hopefully things will develop further. So it is quite a large-scale, long-term project. And from the personal point of view, maybe I would like to mention that I have noticed with myself that there is an interesting phenomenon. When somebody says new, then I've started to take this as negative. It has been said before that innovative is something which is not related to the value of use, and buildings or things and different value categories are listed. Then the first is a novelty, and then at some point it is obsolete, and then there's an antique value or the heritage value. But when we think about the climate crisis and the reuse, continuous use, staying within these topics, then this novelty as a phenomenon or characteristics has become negative in its connotation. So I find that I'm apologizing that yes, I bought a new bag. Well, it's not really new, but it's second hand, but it's new for me. So I don't know when I last bought something which is completely new. So maybe this is a key or precondition of circular economy, because if something seems to be new, then it's something you don't want. So I think this is an important aspect of the project. But technology is not going to save us either. This is a futile dream. We need to act right now. And these green recommendations are the ones which have to be implemented right now based on existing resources. So this is not something to do in 5 years from now when we have more money. So maybe not the new, but it's a very wide question. And maybe you can also ask questions. So if it's not, the aim is not to do less harm, but to do good. If you talk about small towns and the old towns, so how can we get that far?
Jälle väga hea küsimus. Ma ei tea, kas see on reaalselt võimalik.
That's a very good question again. I don't even know if that's possible. You can do less bad, less evil if you know, once you know what is evil. You need to measure, otherwise how do you measure that? And I'm not quite sure everyone understands that. That is a very complex issue. And you can't have a singular answer to it for a very simple reason. What could be bad at somewhere could be good at another place. If you can choose whether a rural place loses people leave because one or the other value will not allow them to carry out their vision. That can be worse than having a slightly faulty vision. It is a very difficult choice to make. A few years ago, I was in Vantaa town, the whole Tikkurila area. I was in the jury of the Building of the Year contest. We checked out many buildings, and I happened to eavesdrop a discussion between city architects. I had just referred to them, pointed out remarkably poor construction quality of new building houses, and they discussed, yes, until now we've been very easy on developers. We've let them build because we've really needed someone to come here and build and do something here, because otherwise we'll die out. All people will move to other areas in Finland. But maybe we are reaching the critical mass. We are sufficiently attractive. We are the airport city. Maybe we can afford to demand better quality. That was a discussion that was really strange for me. I don't think I've ever heard such a discussion in municipalities before. But sometimes that might be perfectly appropriate. As a philosopher, of course you have an idea. How can we hurt nature less, or how can we do any good things for nature? That question reminded me of Michael Brown and his comparison. The whole reducing the footprint rhetorics reminds me of someone saying that he beats their child only 2 times a week compared to the previous 5 times a week. So it's not really sustainable, no matter how slowly or how frequently it happens. He's one of those who initiated the whole circular economy mindset. But it seems to have gotten stuck. It's nice as an idea, but it is so hard to execute it. And since it mostly happens in Estonia on enthusiasm, A good example how things happen is the footprint of a building is assessed by one person at national level. Who is that person and where? At the Ministry of Economic Affairs there is one chancellor working for Jurilas, and maybe there might be another person working with the new fund. But that's exactly how important that topic is for the Republic of Estonia. And that means somebody perhaps works on that at a municipal level, but they never come together. Kalle spoke about general planning issues. These have their own logic. Everyone, everywhere is inventing the wheel. But this is like inventing a new elephant. Everybody thinks that this is what the elephant should look like. Somebody draws a leg and another draws his ear and the trunk, and it's still a weird thing to put together. Well, how should things happen in Estonia? Well, we should have more coordination, stronger coordination. Who does it? Somebody needs to take the lead and figure out a vision that would get somewhere. If you have a spatial vision for Estonia, how will it translate into actual decisions? How will it expand? How restoring and building world will come together? How can this vision be created? It's so nice to write these visions, but what exactly does it mean? What are the phases needed to execute? It does require a lot of time. There must be more than one person, is what I'm saying. I think 10 might be sufficient, not 2,500 as in Finland. Isn't that a bit what the Green Tiger is doing? Yes. We are bringing together the social commissioning, and we are trying to find out what's hindering, what's fostering it, and we're trying to nudge the state in that direction. What is the Green Deal for Estonia? Let's agree in different fields. And there is also a think tank of the creators of future. One subject there is eco-living. What is the living environment in densely populated area? We've just started. The plans are quite grand, and then we clash with the reality. In addition to that, in general plannings, we see climate plans and energy supply plans. And we need to look at it through the glasses of CO2. Dwellings, transport, energy. That is a horizontal aspect. Yes, it's good. It gives us a certain direction as to what hurts most. I do suspect that it's everyone for themselves. Everyone works for their own department. Tartu is an excellent example. They reshuffled it. So no longer there is one person working on streets and the other another person working on transport, whereby they were all building their own elephant. So they sort of reshuffle things. Tallinn is approaching the same project, but climate and energy, 2 out of 3 parishes, is working together on that. It is important to involve small municipalities there to think things over together. Another remark. It's easy to measure CO2 and say, oh, how much, oh, how bad. There are so many tons. But we also need to mind biological diversity. We need to have fertile soil and clean water. These problems are reaching Estonia. We are already experiencing that with soils, and water is becoming an issue, and that's quite depressing. But we do have quite a lot of questions here. And I try to sort them in some sort of a order. Heritage restriction areas, what is their role in Green Deal? Can anybody answer? Trine? Well, heritage protection area. This is an area where they try to maintain existing buildings and add new things only as much as necessary. This, in its turn, is already a green approach. Conservation as a field should bring circular economy to the fore, do that much more. In Soviet times, the purpose was to stop too modernistic approach, but in the current world, it's about little islands of sustainability. And in the management plan, it has been mentioned indeed that this is one of the goals for a conservation area. But any specific requirements that you must insulate or you shouldn't insulate at all, we don't have that. That's a case-by-case solution. What makes the most sense? Next question. Could architects give a hand to construction in preparing green bids and executing them? I don't know, green bids, what are they? That makes you sick, doesn't it? Everyone is allergic to competitive bidding. But I believe that architects do that every day. I don't know who asked that question and where we should give a hand. But yes, I believe that architects are willing to give a hand, either through the association of architects or through a private person. Rain, you meant municipalities? Yes. Give a hand to municipalities, indeed. Estonian municipalities are a very complicated case. Very few municipalities have an architect. The very first tiny little step in the right direction would be if the job of an architect at municipalities would be manned or womaned by professionals. For as long as municipalities, spatial planners, are filled by geological studies experts, it's very hard to initiate any change. Very often these positions are not even fulfilled. It's quite a painful issue, and regrettably little is spoken about it. But that is a major challenge for local municipalities. Tartu may be a trailblazer here, because the Spatial Creation Unit, which has the only climate advisor in a municipality, is driving that project. The same is in Tallinn. They don't have a climate counselor there. That position is labeled differently. But bigger municipalities, well, their situation is a bit better. But Kalle can tell about rather interesting cases that he has encountered. Some municipalities that we visited, it turned out that nobody had worked on spatial planning for decades in Põltsamaa, and I was surprised. How do they develop? Because it seems that over the decades we've been the very first to pay attention to city issues in city architecture. The development of the town has just happened. There has been no planning. Will the Association of Architects give a hand? Well, through these competitions to design public spaces where we give a hand. We definitely should have input because there is so much information. And if every municipality were to debate it or sort it out on their own, they just wouldn't manage. We'll get to architectural policy, which is not a topic for today. But it's about the organization of architecture, involving top-level experts in developing Estonian space. We still can choose between two roads. One is what we can see in Finland, where every municipality, every company, bigger company has their own architectural policy and they've recruited these experts. And the other is centralized solution used by Ireland and the Netherlands. There is a state architect and their council. All these positions are fulfilled and all municipalities know who to turn to. The Association of Architects has worked for a long time on that, suggesting that Estonia should go for the centralized approach because there is a lack of people. It's unlikely that every municipality will be able to hire a climate consultant. But this centralized approach, having experts linked to a public body, that would be an option. Well, there is a shortage of experts everywhere in schools and whatnot, but then shrinking population is good for the planet. Major conflicts here. Let's dream here at the end. We are out of time, but hopefully you don't mind. The topic here is a vibrant old town in small towns. When we speak about local identity, migration, climate change, what will Estonian small towns be like in 10 years? Can you have a picture in your mind's eye? I can imagine Lihula the best. There are so many buildings here in a condition where they'll go this way or the other way. It will either be fixed up or it will become ruins. And I think that's okay. In 10 years, some of these fine limestone auxiliary buildings are fixed up. They are used for whatever it's used nowadays, and some will become ruins, and so be it. In a traditional environment where you have ecological local materials, you don't need to worry too much. If it disintegrates, stone ruins, let it disintegrate. We don't need to worry about demolition and take into the wasteland and waste management plants and transport. And more than half of the houses could be fixed, and others could be fixed up ruins with flowers and whatnot. I'd be quite optimistic. Considering where we started with public space program, good public space in 2014, and the term caused confusion. We needed to explain it to municipal politicians. There were a few examples to show. But today, when we raise the topic of good public space, then everyone knows what we are talking about. Hopefully, the follow-up program that we have now initiated. There are many programs that are coming to term at the end of this year, new ones coming up. It will hopefully get financing from the next round of financing or measures by the EU. In our opinion, it has been delayed too long, but it should work at some point. There are 47 towns in Estonia. City like settlements, there are more than you can count. We've been able to visit 15 towns. In this follow-up program, we've reached nearly 30. So together with the first round, I think this process, the very fact that the completed projects are a good example to these who are still thinking what should they do with their public space. I think this process is gaining momentum. What else is coming together with good public space is the space between buildings. When a municipality fixes the public space, it means the value of real estate will be increased in the surroundings. And these buildings will be used again. Owners that have kept these buildings for decades, having no idea what to do with them. The actual market value of these buildings will increase. It's a Big Street in Rakvere is an excellent example. Many buildings have labels for sale. So this means these buildings they are back in circulation. Many buildings are being renovated, work is underway, so I'd be quite optimistic. I believe this program will continue, it will have continuous financing, and in 10 years the picture is hopefully radically better. Never mind that this migratory change that Karri spoke in his presentation is very much underway. We don't feel that statistically yet, but Corona has given its push to this process. People have found that the second home in a small town or in the countryside is a very promising idea when we have the next wave of pandemics plus the external migration. And as Gary said, mobile positioning, which shows that people spend more and more time outside of Tallinn, Tartu, in their rural homes, and that's very, very clear. There is an opposite movement to urbanization. It has started. How long will it last? We don't know, but it's definitely there. Thank you.
We can keep dreaming. Yes, indeed, because I tend to be pessimist by nature, but if you ask me to dream, then if I were to imagine these people who go and catch butterflies on a meadow, then I try to dream and in a wider context, because Estonia perhaps is covered by a good railway network, not only connecting to the capital but connecting other cities as well to each other. And they all have city centers which has been shrunk, but in a smart way. Everything is close to people at hand, and you know where your child is and you don't have to worry about them too much. And the city center, the square, is not a shopping mall but somewhere else. I think Karin Bachmann said and talked about the center square for Tapa city is at the Ülemiste shopping center, because there's a free train to go to Ülemiste shopping center, which is quite a distance away from their small town. But these people stay in their own town, and the cities have their own vision in place, and they understand that there is no endless progress and endless support. If there is support, there is just a little bit of support, and you can work remotely, and then every now and then you can take the train and you can enjoy something else. If things are being built, then they use sustainable local materials, and if possible maintenance is the priority, and if something is being demolished, then the materials are used. I think you described the scenarios until year 2050. So connections of railway, small networks are all described. But I don't worry at all, because I think that as long as we have this kind of crazy village idiots as Eik here, and the gentleman who spoke here before, and who are both in place, who want to contribute their time towards the benefit of the society, then I think we have nothing to fear. So everything starts with the people themselves. Everything else is just mere details. As a beautiful closure, so let us end here. Thank you. So there you have presents from Kaia Luisa.